Hello, and welcome to Historical Terminology. We're back to talk about one of the other major religions in the world, Judaism, which I have said are historical survivors, which is kind of a good way to describe the people who follow Judaism as they've faced persecution and other issues over their history. So let's get started talking about Judaism and what it's all about. To begin, what is Judaism exactly? Well, it's an Abrahamic, monotheistic, and ethnic religion comprising the collective religious, cultural, and legal tradition of the Jewish people. It was first originated in the Middle East during the Bronze Age, and it is still followed to this day, so it has been around for a very long time. Judaism is considered to be the expression of the covenant of that God established with the Israelites, their ancestors. So it is not just a religion that anybody can really follow, although people can convert and join in. It is a religion that is specifically tied to this group of people. There are some basic tenets to Judaism, and there are these 13 principles of faith that some Jews say are kind of the basic things that you have to believe to be Jewish. So we're going to go through them. And like I said, this is not something that every single Jew agrees with, but this is kind of a good summary of the basic things that they all agree upon. The Creator is the Creator, and they guide everything, and He alone makes everything. The Creator, of course, being God. There's only one Creator, and He creates a unique unity, and He's alone in being their God. There's no physical comparison for this Creator, and He has no body, so He is a spiritual entity. The Creator is the one and only God, right? They're monotheistic, which is very different from that time period when this religion was created, right? Most other places had polytheistic belief systems, so this monotheism was very new. We can only pray to this Creator and no one else, right? That was part of the monotheism. All the words of the prophets are true. These are people who speak for, or God speaks through them. All that Moses said was true, and he's the chief of the prophets, Moses being the first one. The Torah is the same as the one given to Moses, so it hasn't been changed. There is no other Torah from the Creator, right? So that kind of nixes Christianity and Islam, the two Abrahamic religions that come afterwards. The Creator knows all our actions and what is in our hearts. He rewards those who are faithful, and He punishes those who transgress His beliefs. There is a Messiah who will come, and they will wait as long as it takes for Him to appear. And the revival of the dead will occur when the Creator sees fit, and He shall be exalted forever. So those are the 13 basic tenets of Judaism. These are the things that if you asked a religious Jewish person, they would believe these things. These are the things that they believe in. How do Jews worship? Well, there are many different ways in which Jews worship or practice their faith. They follow a code of ethics, which has different ideas in it, like justice, truth, kindness, compassion, and self-respect. They recite prayers 3 times a day, with a 4th prayer on Saturday, which is Shabbat, the day of rest. I apologize. I'm going to mispronounce these Hebrew words so badly, so I will do my best. Some Jews wear religious clothing like a kippah, a talit, or a kittel. There are many Jewish holidays that are celebrated like Hanukkah, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and there are others like that. There are pilgrimage festivals that are celebrated like Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. I definitely said that one wrong. Jews read from the Torah, which is one of their holy texts. They worship in a synagogue, which is like their church. They also follow some dietary laws. You might have heard of kosher. That is kind of their dietary restrictions. And then there are rites of passage, just like there is in Christianity, like Brit Milah, which is circumcision, bar or bat mitzvah, which is when you come of age, marriage, death. Those sorts of things are also celebrated. Let's talk a little bit about the religious texts that are involved in Judaism. The first one is the Hebrew Bible, and it's a collection of Hebrew scriptures, including the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. The Torah is the teaching, and it's a compilation of 5 books that were originally told to Moses. So in Christianity, you have the Gospels, right? In the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, these 5 books are the main important ones. The Nevi'im is the words of the Jewish prophets. So this is all of the prophets afterwards that have added on to this with more revelations from God. The Ketuvim is the writings, which includes Psalms, Proverbs, and other important writings of the Jewish tradition, right? Which is part of this ethnic part of this religion, right? These are all the different kind of historical traditions that have been built into this religion. Judaism also has a collective body of Jewish religious law, which is called the Halakha. These laws are based on biblical commandments, Talmudic and Rabbinic laws, and the customs and traditions of the Jewish people. So there's all of this religious, this body of religious work that also has an effect over Judaism and their people. The Halakha has become increasingly important because the Jews have been spread far and wide throughout the world, and this is called the diaspora. So over the course of history, the Jewish people have been spread out. They're no longer homogenous in one state. They have now been spread across the world, and so these things kind of bind them together. There is also Jewish philosophy, and Jewish philosophers are often preoccupied with thinking about how Judaism and new ideas can be reconciled. This has become more important because the world has been changing, and Judaism has had to change with it, especially with the issues that Jews have faced across the world. There have been several different waves of Jewish philosophy, including the Hellenistic period, the medieval period, and now modern movements that are trying to reconcile modern ideas and modern thoughts into Jewish practice. The hermeneutics are also an important part of Judaism, and these interpretations of the Torah are important because it is how the people who worship Judaism or the God in Judaism also believe the Torah, what it means, right? So this is kind of the interpretation part of Judaism. So learning and interpreting this tradition is thought to be a way to commune with God and enrich their understanding of God's covenant with them. Oftentimes, this process is done by rabbis or professors, and then they're also spiritual leaders. It's also important that we talk about Jewish identity, because that's a big part of this religion, since it is ethnic in a way. There is a distinction between being a Jew and being someone who practices Judaism. According to religious scholars, there is an underlying distinction between the two, the religion and the ethnicity, and this distinction is due to the difference between the spirit and the flesh. Some of this also might be due to Judaism's existence prior to and outside the Western world, where Jews have experienced slavery, anarchic, conquest, occupation, exile, all these different things. So Jewishness is kind of hard to categorize because it's a combination of national, genealogical, and religious identities, unlike other Western traditions, right? You can be Christian and you can be Italian or French. But if you're a Jew, right, you may be genealogically Jewish, but nationally something else, right? There's lots of different ways to define this. So a big question in Judaism is who exactly is a Jew? Who deserves to be a part of this community? And according to most rabbis, you're either born from a Jewish mother, because Judaism is matriarchal in that way, or you can convert and you follow the rules of halakha, which makes you a Jew. All mainstream forms of Judaism welcome sincere converts, and the conversion process is overseen by a religious authority. So they are willing to have people convert and believe in this way, even if they are not genealogically or nationally Jewish. Jews also say that once you're a Jew forever. So if you convert or if you lose faith and become an atheist, right, that identity sticks with you for the rest of your life. And if you're, right, like a woman, your children are also Jewish. Due to the diaspora, there are communities of Jews all around the world, pretty much in every part of the planet. So it's been difficult to accurately assess the number of Jews due to prevailing questions of who counts, and there are people who are Jewish, but they don't self-identify that way. But based on what we do know, in 1900, the global Jewish population was a total at around 11 million. However, right in the Holocaust in the 1940s, 6 million of those Jews were murdered in Europe. And so the estimates for modern day totals are in the range of 13 to 14 million, which is only 2 or 3 million more than they were in 1900. So the population has steadily recovered to that 1940s level. That's about 0.25% of the world. There, of course, are religious groups within Judaism, or as they say, sects, which, are different belief groups within the religion. So we're going to talk about a few of those as well. Orthodox Judaism is the kind of mainstream version. They believe that the Torah was revealed to Moses, and that the laws are binding, and they view that the rules and word of God is unchanging, and they leave less room for interpretation. Orthodoxy itself is divided into even smaller groups. Conservative Judaism is characterized by a commitment to traditional customs. Conservative Judaism has a more friendly view towards modern culture and modern interpretations of rabbinic scholarship, but they do require rabbinic interpretation of Jewish law. So not anybody can interpret the Jewish law in conservative Judaism. Reform Judaism is a more liberal and progressive and defines Judaism in universalist terms. They reject many of the ritual and ceremonial laws of the Torah, and they also emphasize a personal connection to God. So they're kind of like, if you want to make a comparison to Christianity, they could be seen as evangelical in a way, right? They have a personal relationship to God, and they emphasize that a little bit more than the more ceremonial and ritual aspects of Judaism. Reconstructionist Judaism does not observe halakha, and Reconstructionist Jews emphasize community leadership in decisions about prayer. So they are more of a community-based faith, kind of like Presbyterians or, Presbyterians in Christianity. The Jewish Renewal Movement is a North American movement which focuses on spirituality and social justice, and men and women participate equally in prayer in this renewal tradition. Humanistic Judaism is a non-theistic movement centered in North America and Israel, and humanistic Jews emphasize Jewish culture and history as sources of their Jewish identity. So this is less of a religious movement and more of a cultural and historical movement. Then there are the Sephardi and Mizrahi Judaism. Sephardi and Mizrahi do not adhere to the movement framework, and they favor a big tent approach. They tend to practice a more conservative belief system. However, some communities latch on to the teachings of a certain rabbi, so they might be more centered on particular spiritual leaders. Jewish movements in Israel have also been happening since its inception in the 1940s, and there are three major classifications of Jews in Israel, being either secular, traditional, or religious. All of these groups live together in one state and have to reconcile with each other to run the nation of Israel. Let's move on and talk about some Jewish holidays, at least the major important ones. First of all, there is Shabbat, which is weekly, and it's a day of rest that falls on Saturdays. Right, in Christianity, the day of rest is Sunday. In Judaism, it's Saturday. It's meant to commemorate God's day of rest in creation, and Jews aren't supposed to work, and there is a list of things that they are not supposed to be doing on Saturdays. That is considered work. So there are specific things that they list that you cannot do on the day of rest. Passover, that's a week-long holiday that commemorates the exodus from Egypt. Outside of Israel, it's celebrated for 8 days. In ancient times, it coincided with the barley harvest. So this is a 8-day celebration of the Jews escaping Egypt with Moses. Shavuot celebrates the revelation of the Torah to the Israelites, and it coincides with the wheat harvest in biblical times. Generally, during this time, people study during the night, and homes are decorated with greenery. Sukkot commemorates the Israelites' 40 years of wandering to the Promised Land, and they create temporary shelters, and they eat in those exclusively. It also coincided with the fruit harvest. So a lot of these early traditions coincided with harvest times, like a lot of ancient traditions did. Rosh Hashanah is a day of remembrance in the Jewish New Year. It's the beginning of the 10-day period which leads to Yom Kippur, and Jews eat apples with honey and say blessings over other symbolic foods. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement, and it's the holiest day of the Jewish year. It's a day of communal fasting and praying for forgiveness, and many non-religious Jews will come in and practice on Yom Kippur. Just like many Christians will come to church on Christmas, Jews will come and practice on Yom Kippur because it's the big day. Purim is a joyous Jewish holiday that commemorates the deliverance of the Persian Jews from Haman, and this story was written in the book of Esther. It generally occurs in February or March. It's one of those holidays that changes the date of which it happens. Hanukkah is a festival of lights, and it celebrates a miracle. The holiday lasts 8 days. If you've watched any sort of Hanukkah special, you know that it's about the eternal flame in Jerusalem was kept alight for 8 days, despite only having the oil for 1. And they practice Hanukkah by lighting a menorah and exchanging gifts, and there's other parts to that holiday as well. Let's talk a little bit about Jewish history as well, because like I said, it is a cultural and ethnic religion, so the history also plays an important part in Judaism. Judaism originated in ancient times with the Hebrew Bible explaining the Israelites' relationship with God. Abraham is noted as the first Hebrew and received a promise from God that his second son, Isaac, would inherit the land of Israel. The Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, and Moses led them to safety, and he then received the Torah on Mount Sinai. The prophet Samuel appointed Saul to be the first king of Israel, and David followed Saul as king after the people tried to pressure Saul to act against God's wishes. David's son Solomon would go on to build the first temple. After Solomon's reign ended, the kingdom was split into two. The kingdom of Israel was in the north, and the kingdom of Judah was in the south. The kingdom of Israel was destroyed around 720 when it was conquered by the Assyrians, and the kingdom of Judah lasted another roughly 150 years before the Babylonian Empire conquered them and destroyed the first temple. The Judeans were exiled to Babylon, which is considered the first diaspora, right? They were taken from their homeland and spread out. Later, in the return to Zion, the Judeans would return from Persia, and this is when they would build the second temple, returning to their Holy Land. The Jews would find themselves under control of the Roman Empire next, and they were a part of several rebellions against Roman rule due to specific Roman policies that targeted them. These kind of policies included banning circumcision and putting pagan idols in the Temple of the Mount, and then they also sacked Jerusalem. During the time of Roman rule, Jews were moved about the empire and spread all around Europe as a way of mitigating their threat to the empire. The diaspora spread the Jewish people all around and made them a minority in all of the lands they lived in, and their different beliefs led to persecution. Throughout history, after the diaspora, the Jews have been persecuted as others in various times and places. One of the major instances of this would be when the Jews were expelled from Catholic Spain in the Middle Ages. And Jewish bigotry, so bigotry against Jews, is known as anti-Semitism, which is still a problem to this day. The largest instance of anti-Semitism took place in the 40s when the Nazis in Germany rounded up Jews in Europe and executed them. 6 million Jews were murdered systemically by the Nazis, and they also confiscated their wealth and property. The Holocaust has become a large part of the Jewish identity and cultural conscience. So being the victims of this genocide has really kind of become ingrained in Judaism. Let's talk a little bit about Jewish leadership. So who is leading this religion? There was, back in the earlier days, the time of the Second Temple, there was a group of priests that held important duties, maintaining the temple and practicing the faith. The priesthood is an inherited position, and the remaining priests wait patiently for the construction of a third temple to resume their duties. There are also prayer leaders, which are called rabbi, and they are scholars that lead congregations and synagogues. The role requires ordination, right, just like becoming a priest does, and like another rabbi or an academic seminary. So they have to learn and become an authority in Judaism. Hazan are trained vocalists that act as the shots, and they must have a good voice and knowledge of traditional tunes as well as knowledge of traditional prayer meanings. So there are kind of these two important roles in prayer. In Hasidism, Judaism, there aren't rabbis, and Jews practice in smaller groups rather than larger congregations. And that came about in Europe as a response to the persecution of Jews. So they became more focused on individuals learning and practicing than on large groups. And that was a good way for them to blend in and not make a scene in these hostile areas. Finally, let's talk a little bit about Judaism's relationship with other major religions, especially the two other Abrahamic ones. Christianity was originally a sect of Judaism in the time of the Second Temple, but Jews think of Christianity as shetuf, or a belief that has strayed from the monotheism of Judaism. That would basically be because Christianity, right, believes in the Trinity, which is not monotheistic necessarily. Christianity views Judaism as obsolete, and the Catholic Church has actively worked to make life for Jews difficult in Christian lands historically. Nowadays, they're a lot more friendly. Islam and Judaism are both monotheistic religions. They're Abrahamic, but they diverge in the fact that Judaism doesn't really view Jesus or Muhammad as prophets, while Muslims do. Islam has traditionally been more tolerant of Judaism. However, in the last 2 centuries, the conflict between Arabs and Israel has exacerbated that relationship, and it has become more hostile. Thank you so much for watching and trying to learn a little bit more about Judaism. I apologize for mispronouncing or just being wrong. I'm not an expert in Jewish practice nor their history, but I did my best to give out as much information as I could. Go ahead and subscribe to learn more history, and comment in the video if there's something you specifically want to learn about, and I will try to make a video of that as soon as I can. Thanks again, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.